You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. And for a long time, you confused those two things. You thought the ache in your chest meant that you were needy. You thought the pit in your stomach meant you were dramatic. You thought the tears meant you were too emotional, too sensitive, too intense. So you began shrinking your needs until they fit inside someone else's comfort. You told yourself, it's fine. I don't need that. I can handle this. I just need to be more understanding. And slowly, without noticing, you began abandoning yourself in small, quiet ways. Not loudly, not dramatic, just gently. You stopped asking for reassurance. You stopped expecting consistency. You stopped believing that love should feel safe. You told yourself that love was supposed to be confusing, that longing was romantic, that anxiety was passion. But love was never meant to make you question your worth. You were never asking for too much. You were asking to feel chosen, to feel considered, to feel like you mattered even when you weren't in the room. You were asking for basic emotional presence from someone who only knew how to offer fragments. And because they gave you fragments, you started believing you had to earn the rest. So you tried harder. You became easier, quieter, more patient, more forgiving. You convinced yourself that if you could just be less, you would finally be enough. But here's the truth you didn't know then. The right person would have felt relieved by your needs. Relieved that you wanted closeness, relieved that you valued communication, relieved that you loved deeply. Because to someone emotionally healthy, your needs don't feel like pressure. They feel like clarity. But you were standing in front of someone who felt overwhelmed by intimacy, and you thought that meant that you were overwhelming. You weren't. They just didn't have the capacity to meet you where you stood, and instead of recognizing that, you internalized it. You made their limitations into your flaw. You told yourself, I'm too much. I expect too much. I feel too much. When the reality was, you loved in a way they didn't know how to receive. You asked for a level of connection they had never learned to give. And instead of admitting that, they let you carry the weight of it. They let you believe you were difficult. They let you apologize for wanting to feel secure. They let you doubt yourself, and you did. You doubted yourself so much that you started negotiating with your own heart. You told it to calm down, to stop wanting, to stop hoping, to stop needing. But your heart wasn't asking for extravagance. It was asking for consistency, for warmth, for emotional safety, for someone whose words and actions matched. That's not too much. That's the bare minimum of a healthy connection. But when you're standing in front of someone who can't offer that, it starts to feel like a luxury. And you start feeling guilty for wanting it. So you lowered the bar, and lowered it, and lowered it, until you were stepping over it just to stay. You accepted crumbs and called it a meal. You accepted confusion and called it complexity. You accepted emotional distance and called it independence, because admitting the truth would have meant admitting you were not being loved in the way you deserved. And that's a painful thing to face. So you stayed in the story where you were the problem. Because at least in that story, you had control. If you were the problem, you could fix it. If you were too much, you could become less. If you were asking for too much, you could stop asking. But you were never the problem. You were a woman asking for a kind of love that requires emotional maturity, and they simply didn't have it. That's not a reflection of your worth. That's a reflection of their capacity. And the moment you understand that, something shifts inside you. You stop feeling embarrassed for wanting what you want. You stop apologizing for needing reassurance. You stop feeling guilty for expecting effort because you realize you were never asking for too much. You were asking for the kind of love that feels calm instead of chaotic, safe instead of uncertain, reciprocal instead of one-sided, and that kind of love exists. Just not with the person who made you feel like it didn't. One day, you'll meet someone who doesn't flinch at your depth, who doesn't feel burdened by your honesty, who doesn't make you feel dramatic for having emotions, and you'll feel confused at first because it will feel easy. And you'll wonder why it never felt this way before. And then you'll understand. You weren't hard to love. You were loving someone who didn't know how. You weren't needy. You were emotionally aware. You weren't asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. And now, slowly, gently, you're learning to ask again. Not smaller, not quieter, but correctly. And that is where healing begins. Because you were never asking for too much.